What if I told you that for nearly 30 years, the price of money itself was a lie? What if I told you that every single dollar you have ever borrowed for your house, your car, your student loans, even the credit card currently sitting in your wallet was calculated using a rigged number, a number invented by a secret cartel of men in London who decided, over coffee and croissants, how much poorer you should be that day? We are talking about a theft so vast, so systemic, and so complex that the human brain struggles to comprehend it. This is the story of the LIBOR scandal, but it is not just history. Look at your grocery bill, look at your rent, look at the inflation eating your savings alive right now. You think that's an accident? You think that's just market forces? Wake up. The mechanism they used to rig the world in 2008 didn't vanish, it just changed its name. Before we descend into this rabbit hole, I need to know who is with me on this. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments right now. We are building a global community that refuses to be gaslit by financial elites. And if you want the unfiltered truth, the kind that mainstream financial news is too afraid to broadcast, hit that subscribe button. We are going to expose the machinery of your enslavement. Let's go back to the scene of the crime. To understand how they stole the world, you have to understand the weapon they used. It was called LIBOR, the London Interbank Offered Rate. It sounds boring, doesn't it? That's by design. They want you bored. If you're bored, you aren't watching. LIBOR was supposed to be the gold standard of interest rates. Every morning, a small group of the world's biggest banks, Barclays, UBS, Citigroup, JP Morgan, and others would answer a simple question. At what rate could you borrow funds? Were you to do so by asking for and then accepting interbank offers in a reasonable market size just prior to 11 a.m.? Basically, how much does it cost you to borrow cash from other banks? They would submit their numbers. The top and bottom numbers were thrown out, and the rest were averaged. That average became the LIBOR rate for the day. Here is why that matters to you. That tiny percentage point determined the interest rate on $350 trillion worth of financial contracts worldwide. It determined the interest on your adjustable rate mortgage. It determined what cities paid in their municipal bonds to build schools. It determined what companies paid to keep the lights on. It was the heartbeat of the global financial system, and it relied on one thing: honor. The system assumed that these bankers, these wolves of Wall Street and the City of London, would tell the truth about their borrowing costs. It assumed that in a Shark Tank, the sharks would play fair. Instead, they realized something terrifyingly simple. Since the rate was based on estimates submitted by humans, not actual trades, they could just lie. If a trader at Barclays had a massive bet that interest rates would go up, he could just shout across the desk to the guy submitting the LIBOR numbers and say, "Hey, market high today." And just like that, the rate goes up. The trader makes millions in seconds. And you pay an extra $50 on your mortgage that month. You don't notice it. It's just a blip. But multiply that blip by millions of homeowners, thousands of cities, and entire nations. They were skimming the cream off the entire global economy. Now, pause. Look at the world today. We are seeing central banks raising rates at historical speeds to fight inflation. We are told this is necessary medicine. We are told the system is transparent. But when you look at the disparity between the record profits of the banking sector and the crushing debt of the working class, you have to ask yourself, sound familiar? In the mid-2000s, right before the great financial crisis, everything looked fine on the surface. House prices were up, stocks were up, everyone felt rich. But underneath, the foundation was rotting. The banks were manipulating LIBOR to make it look like they were healthier than they were. They kept the rates artificially low to signal to the market, look at us, we can borrow money cheaply, we are stable. It was a lie. They were broke, they were insolvent, but they rigged the thermometer to hide the fever. Does that sound familiar? Think about today. Think about the banks that collapsed earlier this year. Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, Credit Suisse, right up until the moment they imploded. Their balance sheets said they were fine. Their stress tests said they were safe. The rates and metrics said everything was under control. Until it wasn't. The LIBOR scandal proves that the numbers on the screen are not reality. They are marketing materials. Conventional history tells us that the LIBOR scandal was just a case of a few bad apples. A few rogue traders sending funny emails, trying to make a quick cover story. That is the lie they fed you to keep you from burning down the banks. The reality is that this was systemic. It wasn't just about bonuses. It was about survival. During the 2008 crash, banks had to lie. If a bank submitted a high LIBOR rate, it was admitting to the world, nobody wants to lend to me because I'm about to go bust. So, they suppressed the rates. They coordinated. They colluded. Imagine a row of houses on fire. The owners are standing out front, smiling, holding up thermometers that say 72 degrees and so. That is what the banking sector did in 2008. And here is the darkest parallel to right now. Who let them get away with it? The regulators, the central banks, the very people sworn to protect you. Evidence suggests that governments and central banks encouraged the lie because they were terrified that the truth would cause a total collapse of society. They sacrificed your financial future to save their system. Sound familiar? When the government tells you inflation is transitory, while your grocery bill doubles. When they tell you the banking system is resilient, while they print trillions to bail out failing institutions. It is the same playbook. It is the exact same mechanism of deceit. We are not looking at a broken system. We are looking at a system that is working exactly as designed. It is designed to extract wealth from the many and funnel it to the few, using complexity as camouflage. But here is the catch. The LIBOR rigging required a lever. It required a mechanism so powerful that it could move the world without anyone seeing the hand that pushed it. Most people thought the scandal was just about the interest rate. It wasn't. The interest rate was just the bait. The trap, the real weapon of mass financial destruction, was something much darker. A shadow market that dwarfs the stock market, the bond market, and the housing market combined. You need to understand this next part, because this is where the conspiracy goes from greedy bankers to financial. Because the money wasn't in the loans. The money was in the bets. This is the mid-script twist that turns this story upside down. You might think banks make money by lending you cash and collecting interest. That's the fairy tale version. That's banking for peasants. Real banking high stakes. Master of the universe banking is about derivatives. The deduction we made at the start of this investigation pointed us to one specific mechanism: the derivatives market and the shadow banking system. A derivative is a financial contract whose value is derived from something else. In this case, interest rate swaps. This is a bet between two parties on which direction interest rates will go. Let's say Bank A bets that interest rates will go up. Bank B bets they will go down. The winner pays the loser based on the LIBOR rate. Here is the kicker. The amount of money actually exchanged is small, but the notional value, the size of the bet, is astronomical. A trader could hold a position where a movement of just 0.01% in the LIBOR rate 1 basis point could mean a profit or loss of millions of dollars instantly. So, if you are a trader at Citigroup or Deutsche Bank, and you have a massive derivative bet that pays out if LIBOR goes up, you have a multi-million-dollar incentive to pick up the phone and tell the splitter Jack, the rate up today. It wasn't just about keeping borrowing costs low. It was about rigging the casino so that every spin of the wheel landed on your number. And this is where we meet the man the system decided to sacrifice. You won't believe the name, because he looks nothing like a villain. He looks like a math nerd. His name is Tom Hayes. Tom Hayes was a brilliant mathematician, a trader with mild Asperger's syndrome, who worked for UBS in Sydney. He was obsessed with the game. He sat in Tokyo, thousands of miles from London, and yet he became the spider at the center of the web. Hayes didn't just ask for favors, he built a network. He bribed brokers with curry dinners, champagne, and wash trades. He sent messages like, "I need you to keep it as low as possible." He treated the global economy like a video game. He thought he was doing his job. His bosses knew, the executives knew. They gave him bonuses. They called him Rain Man. As long as he was making money, he was a god. But when the scandal broke, when the public demanded blood, the banks turned on him. The CEOs claimed ignorance. The regulators pretended to be shocked. And Tom Hayes, he was thrown to the wolves. He was sentenced to 14 years in prison. The receipt is wilder than you think. While Hayes rotted in a cell, the executives who fostered the culture of corruption walked away with golden parachutes. The banks paid fines that amounted to a few weeks of revenue. It was a cost of business, but Hayes was just a symptom. The disease was the mechanism itself. Let's dive deep into the financial mechanics. This is the how. I want you to visualize the trading floor. It's loud. It smells like stale coffee and testosterone. The mechanism relied on the spread. In a normal market, the price of something is determined by supply and demand. If you want to buy an apple, and I want to sell one, we agree on a price. But LIBOR wasn't a trade, it was an estimate. Imagine if the price of gas wasn't determined by oil supply, but by asking 5 gas station owners, "Hey, what do you feel like charging today?" Now imagine those gas station owners also have a side bet with their friends on what the average price will be. Here is the first specific, shocking stat. In 2008, a document from the New York Fed showed that they knew LIBOR was being underreported. They estimated that banks were understating their borrowing costs by as much as 30 to 40 basis points. That doesn't sound like much, 0.3%. Let's apply that to the real world. On $350 trillion in contracts, a 0.3% manipulation represents a transfer of wealth of roughly $1 trillion per year. That is $1 trillion stolen from savers, pensioners, and cities, and handed to the banks. Another stat, in 2012, Barclays was fined $450 million. It sounds like a lot, but compare that to their profits. It was a slap on the wrist. It was less than 2% of their revenue that year. Here is a third number. The scandal involved banks across 3 continents. It wasn't just London, it was Tokyo, it was New York. It was a global conspiracy of the highest order. Fourth stat. The manipulation spanned from 1991 to 2012. 21 years. An entire generation of finance was built on a fraud. And the fifth, most terrifying number, $6 billion. That is roughly the total amount of fines paid by all the banks combined in the early settlements. $6 billion in fines for rigging a $350 trillion market. Do the math. The crime paid. It paid incredibly well. Why do we use words like greed and illusion? Because they created a moral hazard. Moral hazard is when you take a risk because you know someone else will bear the cost. The banks knew that if they blew up the world, the taxpayers would bail them out, and we did. We bailed them out in 2008, and because nobody went to jail except the foot soldiers like Hayes, they learned a valuable lesson. Cheating works. They created an ecosystem of parasitic finance. They weren't building factories. They weren't curing cancer. They weren't building infrastructure. They were moving numbers on a screen to siphon value away from the real economy. This wasn't just corruption. It was an engineered collapse of trust. They turned the financial market into a slaughterhouse, and we were the cattle. And the most dangerous part, they told us they fixed it. They told us LIBOR is dead, replaced by new risk-free rates like SOFR, our secured overnight financing rate. But ask yourself, do you trust the people who built the new system? The same people who ran the old one? The mechanism of shadow banking where banks move money off their balance sheets to hide. Risk is bigger today than it was in 2008. The derivatives market has not shrunk, it has mutated. We are standing on the edge of a cliff, and the ground is crumbling. And if you're still here, that already makes you different from 99% of people. Most people tap out the moment it gets uncomfortable. The moment it challenges the story they've been sold their entire lives. Work hard, save money, trust the system. It'll take care of you. How's that working out? Think about how your parents or grandparents were told to live. Get a stable job, buy a house, pay the mortgage, put money into a pension or retirement fund. Let professionals manage it. But what happens in a world where the interest rate itself is a weapon? If the rate can be rigged lower, your savings earn less. If it can be nudged higher, your debt costs more. Either way, the gap in the middle feeds the machine. That's not an accident. That's design. That's why so many people did everything right and still ended up broke, underwater, or delayed in retirement by 10, 15, 20 years. It wasn't personal failure. It was structural theft. And this is the part they never want to talk about. Because if you realize the game is rigged, you stop playing it on their terms. You start asking dangerous questions like, why are interest rates set in private meetings instead of public votes? Why are trillions in derivatives allowed to exist off balance sheet, where no ordinary citizen can see them? Why did no senior executive from the biggest banks go to prison for a fraud that spanned decades and spanned continents? And most importantly, if LIBOR was exposed as manipulated, what makes us so sure the replacements aren't being gamed the exact same way, just with better PR? That's the uncomfortable truth. The scandal didn't end. It evolved. Today, Instead of a handful of men on phones, we have black box models running in server farms, executing millions of trades a second. Instead of traders joking in chat rooms about lowballing LIBOR, we have machine-driven strategies, laser-focused on exploiting micro-movements in rates, basis points, spreads, things you never see, but always feel. You feel it when your landlord raises the rent because rates went up. You feel it when your credit card minimum payment quietly increases. You feel it when your government cuts services because debt servicing costs exploded. You feel it. You just don't get to vote on it. And that's the point. They've turned complexity into a cage. They want you to feel stupid when you hear words like interest rate swaps, term structure, basis risk, collateralized obligations. They want you to switch off, to say, this is too complicated. I'll leave it to the experts. Because the moment you do that, they win. Let's be absolutely clear. Complexity is not an accident. Complexity is a moat. It keeps regular people out, while insiders plunder the castle. So here's a simple mental model I want you to take away from this video. Whenever you hear benchmark, think lever. Whenever you hear derivative, think bet. Whenever you hear transition to a new standard, think patching the software, not changing the operating system. LIBOR was a lever. SOFR and other new benchmarks are just new levers, shiny and rebranded. The derivatives market was the casino built around that lever. That casino still stands. It's bigger than ever. And every time there is volatility, it's not just numbers jumping on a screen. It's transfers of wealth, from the unprepared to the prepared, from the misled to the informed. And this is where your role comes in. No, you can't individually bring down the derivatives market. You can't personally audit the entire shadow banking system, but you can stop being the ideal victim. You can stop believing that they will save you. You can pay attention to how much of your life is dependent on debt. Ask yourself, if rates doubled overnight, what happens to me, to my family, to my business? Diversify your sources of information. Don't just watch one news channel that reads press releases from central banks like scripture. Follow independent analysts. Read alternative viewpoints. Question narratives. Talk about this at the dinner table, with friends, with co-workers. Break the taboo about money and how the system actually works. Silence is fertilizer for corruption. Remember, their biggest asset is your apathy. Their worst nightmare is your attention. And when you hear about central bank digital currencies, don't just think faster payments. Think control, programmability. Imagine a world where not only can they set the price of money, but they can set the conditions of how and when you spend it. Imagine a future where your access to your own funds can be throttled, timed, geofenced, or restricted based on policy goals, where negative interest rates can be enforced directly in your wallet, where the same actors who gamed LIBOR now have a mute button for your financial life. Sound extreme? People once thought rigging a $350 trillion benchmark was extreme, right up until the emails and chat logs proved it was routine. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. And right now, all the rhymes are ugly. So as we close this chapter, I want you to do something very specific. Look back over your own life and identify one moment you were blindsided financially. A rate hike, a sudden fee, a blown-up investment, a pension promise that shrank, a currency devaluation, a pay cut, a layoff. Now ask yourself, was that really just bad luck? Or was that shockwave part of a bigger machine you were never told about? Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how every crisis somehow ends with the same winners and the same losers. You start noticing how every bailout rescues balance sheets at the top, while imposing austerity at the bottom. You start noticing how every new benchmark or reform is presented as a fix, but never actually removes the tools of extraction. It simply moves them deeper into the shadows. That's why this isn't just about anger. It's about clarity. Anger without clarity burns you out. Clarity without action changes nothing. So here's the action. Question, share, organize. Question what you're told. Share what you learn with people who still believe the system is neutral. Organize, not just politically, but intellectually. Build communities of people who can decode this stuff, who can compare notes, who can't be gaslit by a press release or a staged hearing on Capitol Hill. Because if there's one thing every elite institution fears, it's not a crash. They can profit from crashes. What they fear is a population that understands how the crash was engineered. If this resonated with you, if you felt that knot in your stomach when you recognized your own life in this story, then this is your invitation to not go back to sleep. Don't just scroll to the next distraction. Don't let this get buried under memes and noise. Share this video with someone you care about, someone who's in debt. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications.